Hello, my friends. Welcome to a series of videos on developmental astrology. So this is a new term that we're introducing into vibrational astrology, and we will be hearing this term more often in the future, developmental astrology. So let me introduce you to the background concepts for developmental astrology. We have a birth chart. And usually we look at that birth chart as a solid wiring diagram for how cosmic energies are trying to flow through us. However, consider the state that we are in when we human beings are born. We are born before our bodies are completely functional. For example, eyesight is limited at birth. Now, most of you are familiar with this, but let's think about it and what that implies about the astrology chart. Our eyesight is limited when we are born. The nervous system, of course, continues to develop into early adulthood. So here's a quote from a website. At birth, an infant is very sensitive to bright light. You may notice how small their pupils look, limiting how much light enters their eyes. For their first 2 months, babies' eyes often do not work together very well. At about 2 months old, babies usually are able to follow a moving object with their eyes as their visual coordination improves. Okay, so let's think about that. It takes 2 months before a baby on average is able to follow a moving object very well. So there's about 2 months there where the baby's getting hit with all this bright light and not able to fully relate to the outer world, not able to follow things clearly. At around 5 months old, a baby's ability to see how far an object is from them has developed more fully. So that's depth perception getting nicely developed by 5 months old. At about 9 months old, babies can generally judge distance pretty well. Okay, and I give the website address for these quotes. Just something to think about as astrologers that we often do not think about, especially in vibrational astrology. We tend to think of that birth chart as this solid wiring diagram. But actually, if you think about it, that wiring diagram is kind of pliable. Or maybe the cosmic energies are fixed and just the body is developing. But it is interesting that we have this boom, this moment of birth, but what is it that's born is still developing after it's born, not fully developed, and very influenced by the environment. And the rational part of a teen's brain isn't fully developed and won't be until age 25 or so. So just to think about the long developmental cycle, and of course we know how hormones develop in your teens and so on, so the body and the way information is processed, the nervous system, under constant development, doesn't become completely formed until about, say, roughly 25 years old. So the basic structure and potential of the body is set at birth, the potential, the basic structure. However, visual, auditory, and tactile stimulation are needed, as well as good nutrition for the potential to develop. We're all familiar with that. The kinds of experiences the baby has shape the physical, mental, and emotional system. So we know that a baby needs to be touched physically, needs to have visual experiences. These things help the baby's nervous system and total system develop in a healthy way. Our energetic and physical system becomes more clearly defined and solidified, especially in childhood and teen years. Okay, so I'm spending some time on this. You're already familiar with this, but just to feel it and think deeply about it, because what we're going to be looking at now is developmental astrology. And in developmental astrology, we're going to see how this, you might say, flexible or pliable nervous system an energetic system is entrained, how it is focused, how it is, you might even say, modified or made more definitive over time. So the soft and pliable nature of the baby comes into clear focus, and a more competent but also less flexible energetic and physical system. More competent. At 9 years old, the baby has good depth perception, able to follow objects, etc. The rational part of the brain continues to develop. So we become more competent, more able to do things physically, mentally, but we're also becoming more defined. So that definition of who we are continues after birth. And what we're going to see in these videos, this series of videos, is some of the astrology that we can use to see how the birth chart takes form. So one of the reasons why babies born close together in time develop very differently is from their environment, and we can analyze some of the impacts of that environment astrologically. And I'm going to show one very clear example of the detailed analysis we can do to see how the baby's energetic system takes shape, how our thinking, how our attitudes are defined, continue to be defined after birth. So if you wanted to do like a totally complete astrological analysis, we would need to look at the birth chart and these influences after birth that help shape the way that those aspect configurations and midpoint configurations are developed and expressed. There's still room for those aspects and midpoint configurations to be defined. You could even say, I wouldn't say modified, not modified outside their potential, but the specific potential and form takes place after birth. Okay, so I propose that the birth chart also takes on its specific expression, identity, and form through our experiences. So not only does the baby take on specific expression, identity, and form through the baby's experiences, but the birth chart also does. And we're going to get a very clear example of this, so this is not just philosophical and abstract. Fortunately, there are at least 3 relatively simple astrological techniques to see the impact of developmental astrology. And one in particular works very well, and I will explain it and illustrate it with an example. So we're calling this developmental astrology. The way that the birth chart takes on a more specific form, how the birth chart develops into a very specific kinds of expression, is the developmental astrology. And there are 3 basic techniques that we're aware of now. There may be more in the future that we use to see how the birth chart becomes more clearly defined and what forms it takes on and what expressions it will take on. And one of those is, of those 3, is the one that I've worked with the most, and that's the one I'm going to show you. So these are the 3 techniques in developmental astrology. 3 techniques for seeing how the potential of the birth chart becomes more specifically defined. Number 1, transits. For example, what are the transits while depth perception is being developed? So during those first 5 months to 9 months, what are the transits? What's happening? And how would that affect the person? Or say during puberty when hormones are changing. What transits are going on? How are they going to affect the person? In theory, this is very important. But remember that vibrational astrology is very evidence-based. So we don't just go by common sense and theory. We have to use that common sense and theory and see it work out in real examples, and hopefully in ways where we can have some kind of control groups or extreme case sampling or some ways to help us clarify what we're seeing. So we need more research on this. As far as I know, none of us have in vibrational astrology have done a clearly documented how transits are changing not only what you experienced then, but what you're experiencing in general in the future. Well, we do have some examples of that. For example, in our bipolar disorder research of traumatic events, and we all have had events that have changed the course of our lives. People get into accidents, transiting Uranus is on your 7th house. There's a breakup in a relationship and the long-term effects from that. So in a way, we do already see that in any form of astrology. So, there is some work on that, but I think we need more work to define how we would use that on a regular basis. So in addition to transits, of course, there are progressions and possibly other techniques that show the unfolding of the chart. So with transits, you're looking at how a person's experiences have long-lasting effects. With progressions, you're seeing how the person is changing from within. So as the sun sign every 3 years goes into a new, every 30 years, the sun goes into a new sign. So if you were born with the sun at 20 degrees of a sign, at about 10 years old, because there are about 10 degrees left in the sign, that progressed sun would go into a new sign. The moon goes into a new sign every 2.5 years. So in theory, there is a developmental process. The progressed chart is an unfolding self. I know Giselle Terry has done some work with her clients and observing how the unfolding of their character is reflected in the progressed chart. So that's a second way. The third way that we see developmental astrology, that we see the way that a person's potential that's in the birth chart changes, becomes more clearly defined, takes on a specific character. The third way is through chart comparison with other people. And what I'm proposing is that the birth chart takes on its specific identity and form through our experiences. And this is the method that I'm going to share with you in this series of videos. How chart comparisons change who you become. The chart comparison will alter, it will channel the stream of energy. It's like a river or a creek that's flowing. You have this energy that's flowing through you, shown by the birth chart and through the people you interact with. And the chart comparison, that stream of energy develops a new character, a new specific quality, even gets diverted a little bit. It takes on its own unique qualities through relationships. So I have looked at the chart comparison of people, chart comparison between people who have a significant influence during childhood and teens. And a clear way to do the analysis has emerged, and in every case the astrological analysis is clear and helpful. So I'm going to show you the steps for finding out how other people define the specific way in which a person expresses and develops the potential in the birth chart. So this is a new development in vibrational astrology. And we have ideas on how to research this in a more definitive and quantitative way in the future. But what I'm going to lay out now are some basic principles based on observation of individuals, and then we'll continue to analyze and study and utilize these concepts and do more detailed research. But it's already obvious that this is important. This is very important. And not only does it help us analyze better what a person is like, but it's going to show how we can influence the development of people, children, teenagers, and even into adulthood, how our path in life is altered by the people we interact with. And again, I'm going to show you a clear procedure for doing this, for doing this analysis to see how the people you interact with change your life path. Wow. They change your life path, and in a way that, frankly, you might say surprised me. I mean, I didn't have a lot of a priori assumptions, but wow, the way in which people affect our path in life is very clear and rather dramatic. So this gives us another tool for helping people, assisting people, and another tool for achieving whatever goals a person has. So, as we shall see in the next video in this series of videos, the procedure is clear. This procedure for analyzing chart comparisons to see how they affect the trajectory of your life. You know, that's a good phrase for it. Let me say that again. We will see how the specific people we interact with and are influenced by affect the trajectory of our lives. So the procedure is clear, and I will give just one example. This one example is very impressive, but it's not more impressive than other cases. I can make more and more videos of other examples because I've looked at a lot of them. But I'm just going to show one to demonstrate the procedure for doing this analysis. And what we're going to see is that it's not just people that you are with physically. It's not just your brothers and sisters, your parents, your friends, your teachers. Of course, they're very important, but somewhat, you might say, surprising, or maybe it's not surprising, but intriguing or impressive, is that writers, athletes, musicians, actors have a big impact on us. Perhaps greater than we had realized, greater than I had anticipated. Very clear and sharp. So, as a child, as a teenager, during those developmental years, and it's also true even as an adult, what writers did you have? You know, a writer or a musician? Was there specific music? Most of us have some music that influenced us in our early teens or our middle teens. The music we loved, that, you know, maybe we danced to it or got excited by it, or athletes that you loved, or actors. You just loved a particular actor, especially in particular movies. Do you have some people that stand out to you? And what I'm saying is that these people who stand out for you, who represent something important, even if they did not affect your life directly, even if you did not pursue music, you know, you didn't play a musical instrument or join a choir or whatever, nevertheless, even though you didn't follow the path of music, that singer or, you know, guitar player, whatever it is, that got into your heart and soul, moved you. The connection you have with that person influences the trajectory of your life more powerfully than I might have imagined. More powerfully because we're not actually with the person. We're not following in the footsteps of that person. It's just somebody who, for some period of time, you know, was cool. Like, wow, I really dig, you know, this artist. I really love, you know, maybe it was some famous artist like Van Gogh or Renoir or who knows what, or less famous artist. and you just really got into their paintings. Maybe you bought one or some event, things that happen. They don't seem dramatic. They don't seem like they have altered our lives. They don't seem unusual. Maybe thousands of people love this person. The impact is tremendous. Now, why would this impact be so great? Why would having a favorite singer, or you read the poems of a certain person, maybe, whoever that was, or the lyrics in certain songs, something, why is that person not only inspiring us at that moment, but less obviously affecting the entire trajectory of our lives? Just because you love that song, just because you love that poem, it's going to affect your energy flow in a significant and clear way? Amazingly, yes. It's really surprising, because I'm saying these people are not people that you think about all the time. They just had that little bounce or magic or spark for some period of time. That's enough, especially before 25 years old, as a child, as a teenager. Especially then, it's very, very obvious. But it continues to be clear even into adulthood. Okay, so, it makes me wonder, as we look at this example that I'll show you in the next videos in the series, why would this impact be so great? Well, one reason is because we are not separate energy circuits. I am not separate from you. None of us are separate from each other. Our individual energy systems are always interacting and responding with other energy systems. And there is no completely sharp and clear separation between peoples. There's an illusion that we're separate because our bodies are distinct from each other. My body is distinct from yours. I mean, for all practical purposes, if I bang my hand on a table, or I'm hammering and I hit my finger and it hurts, your finger is not immediately and directly hurting. You might have some level of empathy, but it's not so clear and direct. Our bodies are not directly connected. Our minds are. Our feelings are. The idea is that our thoughts and our feelings are not generated from our brains and our hormonal system and whatever else is involved. Our brain is like a radio receiver. The thoughts are out there and flowing between us. And this is why the impact is so great. And here's a visualization of it from Van Gogh's iconic, famous painting, Starry Night. And here's a quote from a website. I give the website address down here, where Van Gogh has what this our art critic, we can call him or her, their interpretation of what's going on with this painting. And I think this interpretation is fairly obvious and straightforward, and it's what I am trying to say, but here you have a painting of it. Let's read what this person says about this iconic painting, Starry Night. Divide the painting into 3 parts. The sky is the divine. It is by far the most dreamlike, unreal part of the painting, beyond human comprehension and just out of reach. Go down 1 level to the cypress, the hills, and the other trees on the ground. They bend and swirl. The straight lines and sharp angles divide it from the rest of the painting. However, note the dots of trees rolled through the village, how the spire of the church stretches up. Here's that church with that spire reaching up into the sky. So this divine realm is swirling. It reaches up to the sky. Van Gogh brings God to the village. So the village has houses with sharp, clear edges. And then the rolling hills and the trees have some of the flow of the sky, but they're not as completely intermixed. They still have some definition. And then as you get up into the divine realm, nothing is distinct from each other. And one thing that I find particularly interesting in this painting is the moon in the upper right corner. The moon, which of course is physical, we can go out and look at the moon. Van Gogh shows it as part of the swirling nature, almost as if Van Gogh had seen into the physics that would come after his life, many years into the future, where we discover that the physical world is made up of wave potentials, that atoms are not completely physical. So this swirling reality in which the physical is something coming out of the swirling interactive life force. This is the nature of how astrology works and how we work. Everything is flowing in and out of each other. So if you think of the moon in the way Van Gogh has painted it as this swirling dynamic sphere, it's like a whirlpool or a tornado. It's like this energy has gathered together into this swirling, centered force. And out of that centralized force, something physical appears. The physical is manifesting out of the energy. The energy is more primary. It's more of the spirit of things. It's in the dynamic energy. And this energy, this flow, this dynamism is never distinct. It doesn't have the hard edges of physical reality. And our minds and our feelings are so intertwined. They do not belong to us. They swirl into us and out of us. And that's why when a person moves to a new place, very often that person, without realizing it, takes on the accent. If they move from the United States to England, or from England to the United States, or something like that, some people's accent does not change. They retain their original form. But in subtle ways, we take on the quality of whatever we experience. And the only reason why somebody's accent does not change is because they're simply holding fast to their previous connection. Nothing wrong with that. But the point is, our thoughts, our feelings, when you think of the child who cannot even see clearly, who cannot even follow objects, as that child's nervous system develops, as their brain power develops and takes on a definite form, whatever it is they're looking at, experiencing, and interacting with becomes a part of them. It flows into them. It becomes a part of who they are. Because who we are is not a thing. Who we are is the way in which we are channels for energy. It's the way in which thoughts move through us and feelings move through us. How we catch a wave, hold it, nurture it, and then send it out. So this is why the people we interact with, and even that we do not interact with physically, but who represent something important to us. So when you hear that song and you say, oh, I love so-and-so's voice. Oh, I love the lyrics to this song. Oh, I love this movie and the story behind it. Whatever it is that you love, that sparked you, that you gravitated to, that you took into yourself, is you. It is you. It has flowed into you, and you are only what flows in, through, and out of you. That's what we are. We are this celestial sphere. So this is just to help us realize why these interactions with other people are so important. And even the word interactions is an exaggeration, because we're not even interacting. That actor that you love, or that poet, or the lyrics of that song, they never talked to you. You just received from them. What they are doing flowed into you and becomes a part of who you are. So the cosmos is swirling and vibrant. Energy swirls and flows in out and through energy vortexes. The moon and stars are a manifestation or visible part of the creative spirit, right? The moon and stars are a manifestation or visible part of the creative spirit and life force that reveals centers of energy flow as physical things. So the physical things are like a condensation. I mean, Einstein's theory, E equals mc squared. Matter is energy. It's a highly condensed, powerful form of energy that becomes what we would call physical. So Van Gogh's mad mystic vision describes what scientists discover later as particles being ephemeral wave functions. We also are interacting, swirling energy systems, and we are not distinct from each other. So all of this is not new. Everything I've presented in this introductory video to developmental astrology is not for the purpose of telling you something you've never thought about before. I think probably everyone experiencing this video has thought about these things before. It's more like a meditation, to feel it deeply, to be clear about what a proper perspective on life is, clear about what's going on, and it helps us realize why this works so well, because it's kind of stunning to me that when I started looking at the artist, the musician, I'll ask somebody, or they'll happen to mention, oh, I loved this movie, oh, I love this actress. Wow, you look at the synastry, the connections of that person to them, and you realize the way in which their life trajectory incorporates the qualities of that person. Even though, again, if that person is a musician or a songwriter, whatever it is, you may not become a songwriter. There's no you're not directly following their path, but it's the way of thinking. You might say the philosophy, the attitude, and the creativity and sensitivity is formed with the qualities of that person. So we're going to see an example of this. It'll probably take maybe 2 more videos. So this is to introduce the background concepts, the overall way we're thinking of it, what's going on with developmental astrology, the 3 methods for developmental astrology, and that our focus is on the 3rd one right now with the people that, how can I say, not interact, the people that represent something important to you or impacted you, even temporarily, something that you loved, even if not for a long time, something that became special to you. And not even so much that you love it, but just that it impacted you. It was in your environment and it entered into your system in a strong way. So we're going to analyze one example of this in some detail so that you can understand the specific procedure for doing it and how this works out in a real example. Okay, I'll see you in the next video in this series. Thank you very much for listening, my friends. God bless. Namaste.